Forecast. This Wednesday already off to a wet start. We've had our fair share of widespread showers in the picture that have moved in from west to east. So we'll go ahead and break down what's still standing in the way of some of the rain on your satellite and radar imagery. But let's go ahead and talk about the totals that we've seen so far since the beginning of this morning in terms of how much rainfall we've received. And you can see that the axis of highest rainfall totals is going back over into eastern Alabama, just to the south of I-85, across Columbus into western Georgia. And then you can see the intensity of rainfall kind of started fizzling out as it moved into our westernmost counties, specifically portions of Taylor, Upson, Crawford, Monroe, and maybe even portions of Lamar County. And then it transitions from those patchy areas of green into more so a dark blue. And then we can start to see some totals above 1 inch up in Putnam County and in Hancock County. So let's go over some of those specific totals in those green shades that you can see. Up just north of Eatonton, pretty close to Lake Oconee, 1.8 inches of rain, 1.3 on the other side of Lake Oconee into Hancock County, 1.2 inches in the northern end of Hancock County. But as you go down to the south, areas like Baldwin County, Washington County, and down to Wilkinson County, maybe just only about 1/10 of an inch of rain. So if you were just outside of this dark blue shade or these areas of green that are closer to about 1 inch of rainfall in some localized areas, you really didn't get much in the way of rainfall this morning. But some areas did get lucky. Jasper County, just south of Monticello, 1.2 inches. Just to the north of Forsyth, about 1 inch of rain, 1.3 around the Culloden area down in southwest Monroe County, and then 1.2 inches in northern Taylor County, along with Roberta and Thomaston, also right on the cusp of that 1 inch mark. As we go down to the south, rain was a bit harder to come by, but you can see that we do have some shades of a bit of a darker blue. But overall, I don't think I see any totals except over here to the east of Soperton, right on the edge of Treutlen County, Montgomery County, and Toombs and Emmanuel County, south of I-16. 1.2 inches of rain there. Everyone else, for the most part, just only got a couple tenths of an inch of rain. And rain was actually pretty scarce over in western Houston County, northern Houston County, amongst Perry and in Warner Robins. But we did see our fair share of some higher rainfall totals over to the west and the northwest, not necessarily overlapping with these areas that are in a severe drought as of right now, but this rainfall that we did receive this morning, it actually won't get taken into account with the release of the drought monitor tomorrow. We take the data as of every Tuesday, so the cutoff was as of yesterday. So today and this morning's rain is going to be taken into account as of next week's update. So we will be awaiting that. I do imagine things are going to very likely stay the same, or we may see even a little bit of improvement, as we did have another rainmaker over the course of this past weekend. So you can see moderate drought conditions for most of central Georgia still, and then we get into severe drought criteria in areas like Taylor County, Macon County, Peach, Crawford, and portions of Houston and Upson counties that are in that orange shade. So scattered showers today. It was more so a story of some widespread showers, but now as we're transitioning into the second half of Wednesday, we are looking at those showers to scatter out in nature. And then bitterly cold for Thursday. No way around that. We'll talk about just how cold the temperatures are going to feel as we go throughout the day on Thursday. And we are going to be staying cold for an extended stretch of time all the way through your weekend and into the beginning of next week. And of course, what a lot of you are probably tuning in to hear about, what about anything in the way of frozen precipitation? We'll break down everything you need to know as it pertains to your weekend forecast, as it pertains to the end of the work week forecast, and a look at what's ahead as we head into Martin Luther King Day on Monday. So here's a look around the quad, where Dublin actually still seeing some showers as of right now. Really hard to see, but you can see a couple of the droplets of water continuing to fall from the sky here in the top right of your screen. It does look like the rain has come to a conclusion in downtown Macon, Warner Robins, and at the Georgia National Fairgrounds. However, you can see plenty of wet surfaces that still remain in light of the cloudy atmosphere that we continue to have. So obviously the absence of sunshine not allowing for much in the way of evaporation so far. And downtown Dublin, you can definitely see the glimmer and the shine along the streets of downtown as the rain does continue to fall. It is looking more like a matte shade that you can see down in Perry, down in Warner Robins. The roads are still wet, but not as slick as they are down in Lawrence County. And the good news is most of that rain will continue to exit off to the east over the next hour or so, but we are holding on to our fair share of some showers, even some pockets of heavy rain over in our east and our southeasternmost counties, some of those areas that didn't quite have as impressive rainfall totals as areas up to the north and the northwest. But as a matter of fact, we still have some showers that are lingering along the I-75 North corridor, specifically across areas like Pike County, up into Spalding County near Griffin, and getting up into Henry County near McDonough. But you can see that batch of rain does extend as far east as Jasper County, where there are a few scattered sprinkles around Monticello, maybe pretty close to Shadydale up in the northern end of the county. But other than that, it's a story of gloomy skies farther up to the north, and we can see maybe a batch of some steady showers trying to clip western Upson County as of right now. But once again, most of the rain found down to the south, as far north as areas like Washington County. A batch of heavy rain right here in the orange and the red colors just south of Wrightsville in southern Johnson County, extending into portions of northeastern Lawrence County, and some steady rain all the way through the eastern half of Lawrence County, down to Wheeler, down to Telfair counties. But it does look like the most widespread heavy rain that we can find just over to the east of Swainsboro, making its way over to the South Carolina state line. As we go across the rest of southern central Georgia, scattered light showers south of Eastman and Dodge County, seeing a couple sprinkles there in eastern Wilcox County, and even more scattered out in nature are some of the light showers that we spot still in Crisp County, still in Dooley County, maybe another cluster of some steady rain trying to move into southern Taylor County as of the 11 a.m. hour. So rain going to start to scatter out after this big cluster does move out of the picture. We'll talk about what Future View has in the way of your rain chances for the rest of today. But all in all, your satellite and radar picture is very messy just across the state of Georgia in general. You can start to see that maybe some of this rain is taking a bit of organization, trying to organize into one line right here that is present down here more so in a scattered cluster in southeast central Georgia, but it extends all the way up into Columbia. And then this batch of showers up here closer to Charlotte, maybe up to Greenville, is extending back over to the west, as far west as the metro Atlanta area, maybe all the way down to the Columbus area. And then more showers are present up to the north and the northwest of us. And this is going to be because we do have two frontal boundaries that are going to pass through. So we'll talk about where those are currently located and talk about why one of them is going to kind of overtake the other, and it's going to be the dominating force and the dominating influence with your forecast over the next couple of days. So not only has it been a nasty start to today, it has been a chilly start. And I think chilly rain is probably the worst thing that I can forecast during the winter months. But of course, that's when our temperatures are just cooler during the calendar year, and we don't really have any say whatsoever with it. All I can tell you is just continue to bundle up and keep those layers on. So temperatures have not wavered too much, maybe a little bit of an increase since this morning, but scattered about the low 40s and the mid 40s. Don't even think I see anyone in the upper 40s anymore, but I do anticipate a little bit more of a warm up, maybe roughly about an 8 to 10 degree increase as we go into the afternoon. But right now, current temperatures all across the southeast United States, they are actually scattered about the mid 40s for the most part. 45 in Nashville, 47 in Charlotte, 55 over in Charleston. I imagine they don't have as much cloud cover over there closer to the Atlantic coast. A little bit more humid, and obviously probably getting your fair share of sunshine as you go down to Jacksonville, go down to Orlando, 59 and 64 degrees. But Montgomery also at 46 degrees, and maybe the cloud cover gets a bit more scarce over to the west, and that's why we spot plenty of upper 50s over in areas like New Orleans, Houston, and getting up into Dallas, into northeast Texas, and well cooler up to the north of us. So that is going to be a big implication with our forecast. As you can see, the winds are mighty gusty up here, kind of in the eastern Great Plains, getting into the Mississippi River Valley, up pretty close to Illinois, Iowa. Those winds coming out of the northerly direction going to continue to push down farther to the south. But we can start to see maybe some signs of our frontal boundary where the winds do start to shift direction, and that's going to be a couple states up to the north and the northwest of us. But as that front continues to push through, those northerly winds will continue to usher down into the southeast, and it's going to bring a lot of that dark blue color with it. In terms of the humidity, there has been a slight uptick, which is kind of the reasoning for our rain chances that we've had so far this morning and we continue to have throughout the rest of today, but still not overly humid whatsoever. You're not really noticing the moisture content, besides the fact that, yes, there are a few sprinkles in the forecast, and also there are still plenty of wet surfaces at the ground. In terms of the breeze, it is still going to be a factor right now because we've had our fair share of some gusts that get up to maybe 10 to 15 miles per hour so far this morning, and sustained winds right now as high as 6 to 9, maybe even 10 miles per hour across certain locations in central Georgia. So that's where your feels like temperature could even be down into the 30s. How about this? Feels like 39 degrees in Cochran, but for the most part, it does look like most areas here in central Georgia are feeling like the low 40s, even if your temperatures are a little bit warmer in the mid to the upper 40s. But all in all, it's a chilly forecast, but these numbers are not really going to come into good comparison compared to what's to come as of tomorrow morning. But let's circle back to yesterday, because yesterday was that one last nice day in the forecast before we were going to get bitterly and blistering cold. But we're off to a cold start. 24 degrees for a morning low temperature. We didn't see values get near as cold as that this morning, which we are very thankful for. But if we had values like that, then we would have been talking snow this morning, not widespread showers. But then we increased to a high of 61, just slightly above average for yesterday by 2 degrees and just slightly above that 60-degree mark. But it was paired up with plenty of sunshine, so it did feel pretty good as of yesterday afternoon. I can personally attest I went out and took my own advice, and I soaked it up while I could and played a round of golf yesterday, because I know the golf course is not going to be a fun place to be with some of the bitterly cold temperatures that are arriving and some of the frost delays that are very likely to happen each and every morning and delay your start on the golf course. So 78, the record for yesterday, set back in 2017. Not really too close to that, about 17 degrees off. And 10 degrees, your record low temperature back in 1918. So while 24, yes, was a very cold start to the morning, we were 12 degrees below average. It could always be a whole lot worse. At least we weren't starting out maybe flirting with the single digits for your actual temperatures as you made your way outside. No rain yesterday, but once we get a view of today's almanac data, I imagine maybe we'll have some numbers that at least put a significant dent in this year departure that has just continued to go farther and farther and farther down in the negative direction. I imagine we'll get some reprieve on that, maybe even get closer to about a half inch below where we should be at this time of year, but we'll check out this graphic as we go into tomorrow morning, and yesterday's almanac will be talking about what happened over the course of today. Sunrise time, 7:37, no change to that, but sunset time, 5:50 yesterday. So we are creeping closer and closer to that first 6 p.m. sunset again, which is in fact going to happen in just a matter of about 10 days, January 25th. Go ahead and mark your calendars for that date. That will be our first 6 p.m. sunset, and then we'll continue to have the sunset later and later and later. By the time we change the clocks around, we're actually going to have a 7:30 p.m. sunset. So it is going to get back to more appropriate time for when the sun should set. Obviously, you don't want to be having to make dinner at 5:30, and then it already being dark outside. So here's a look at your high temperatures for January. One of these boxes is not like the other, and that actually happened on Monday, where we had a high temperature of 52 degrees, the only day throughout January so far that we've had below average high temperatures. Yesterday followed that day up with another above average day, just slightly. 61 degrees is at least a whole lot closer to average for this time of year, as opposed to 77, 79, and 80 degrees, which we all hit as of late last week. So very warm and very spring-like spell of weather as we kicked off the new year. However, I do anticipate an extended streak of some of these blue boxes. I think 61 yesterday, that's very likely going to be the last time that we have an above average high temperature until we get into sometime around the midweek, maybe even to the late portion of the work week next week. So morning showers for today, and then now we are going to transition into just a downright chilly, windy, gloomy, and maybe even still a bit dreary of a day for your Wednesday. Southwest winds 5 to 15 miles per hour, and the occasional gust could get up to around 25 miles per hour. I anticipate those gusty winds to really start to build into the forecast after we cross over lunchtime, sometime around 2 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And if you remember the last 2 days, both Monday and Tuesday, we've been coming here on the extended forecast, and I have been saying that I did expect today to be more so a story of some near average high temperatures. Well, over the last 24 hours, obviously we know weather changes with the snap of a fingers, but what we've seen is increased confidence in cloud coverage all throughout today. So we're not anticipating as many peaks of sunshine, hence why your high temperature today got a bit of a bump down into the mid 50s. So 54 for a high temperature, but I still think we are going to be well below that average mark of 59 degrees. So that's why I think yesterday was going to be the last day for about a week or so that we will have some above average numbers, but not necessarily the worst thing. At least we're finally feeling more appropriate for this time of year. However, we are just taking it a little bit too far, or rather Mother Nature is taking it a little bit too far. I'm just the messenger here. So hour by hour, your temperatures will actually start to get a bit of a bump up as we go into those hours just past lunchtime, peaking at around 52 degrees. That's when I anticipate maybe some occasional peaks of sunshine, but overall this afternoon will be characterized by more clouds than sun present. And I do anticipate a lot of the rain chances at least get out of the picture throughout the afternoon until we get into the evening hours. But let's go ahead and talk about your surface map. Typically, this is around the time we talk about your satellite and radar, but it was a bit of an active image, so I elected to show that a little bit earlier into your extended forecast. So two frontal boundaries are actually causing a lot of the active weather down here in the east and the southeast United States. The first one is back here behind all of this rain that we do see in Nashville, Huntsville, over into central Mississippi. This is going to be the frontal boundary that kind of slows down in motion. But if you remember yesterday, we were talking about a low pressure system all the way up into southern Canada, and there was a cold front attached to it. That low pressure system has moved off over to the east. So the center of low pressure is going to be above the map scene camera frame that I do have right now. But here is that cold front that was attached to the left side of it, and that is going to continue to usher in some significantly cooler air from up there in Canada. And this front is going to kind of overtake the frontal boundary that is driving a lot of the rain chances right now as we go throughout the course of today. And that frontal boundary back there all the way up in the central plains, that's going to be the one that we're talking about that passes through later on for your Wednesday night. So here's a look at future view for the rest of today. Like I mentioned, a lot of that rain is already moving off to the east, and then we have some breezy conditions, a pretty gloomy atmosphere, but maybe even still a couple of isolated sprinkle showers that you could run into across the course of this afternoon. All in all, the rain chances will not be near as widespread as what we've been dealing with throughout most of the morning, but we will have one more opportunity, I think, for some rain coming through, and that's going to start in those hours just past dinner time. So the early nighttime hours starting around 7 to maybe 8 p.m. A few spotty light showers will start to pass through as the frontal boundary begins to drive through central Georgia, but you will see conditions are clearing out behind the frontal boundary that could be driving a few more light shower chances into the nighttime hours and right there around midnight as we go into Thursday. Well, here's how we start out Thursday morning. Nice and clear, which is a very pleasant sight to see after how gloomy today is, after how dreary the forecast is. We'll have plenty of sunshine as we go throughout tomorrow, but we do have some clouds off to the east, so maybe a bit of a later sunrise by a couple of minutes as the sun will have to peak above the edge of some of that cloud cover off to the east. And then as we go about the day on Thursday, it is still looking very nice, but I have thrown those pause points on Thursday morning and Thursday afternoon because you can see that the wind arrows are nice and long. They are yellow in color. We are going to have gusty winds present not only Thursday morning, but lingering into the afternoon before finally they start to taper off a bit as we go into Friday morning, and that's going to be a very good thing that we'll talk about in just a moment. But then we go into Friday afternoon, the breeze starts to pick up just a little bit, but not near as gusty as what we do see across the course of Thursday. Still entirely clear. Any Friday evening plans that you have, they're looking good to go, but it is going to be very chilly, so make sure that you bundle up for those evening plans. And then here comes some more rain. As we go into Saturday at 4 a.m., you will see maybe a bit of a glimpse of it, but you can see some pinks and maybe even some light blue and purple colors up there in the North Georgia mountains. This rainmaker that comes through early on Saturday, which has kind of gotten a bit of an increase in rain chances now that future view goes this far out into the weekend, this is going to have the chance for being semi-widespread, but don't get locked into anything in the way of frozen precipitation chances on Saturday. We will have a better chance of that throughout this weekend. It's still a very low chance, but whatever happens in the way of rain or whatever falls in the way of rain is going to be of the liquid form on Saturday because our temperatures are not forecast to get below freezing temperature Friday night into early Saturday morning. So here's a look at future view. The wind gusts, they are going to pick up as we go into the afternoon, like we mentioned. And then as the frontal boundary comes through later tonight, the gusty winds continue overnight into early tomorrow morning. Gusts up to 20 to 25, maybe even some isolated pockets tomorrow afternoon where we have some gusts up to 30 miles per hour. So when we have these gusty winds present, the windier conditions it just adds an extra bite to the chill that you are feeling this time of year during the winter. But we will see the breeze subside as we go into Friday morning before it picks back up. Maybe some gusts up to 15 to 20 miles per hour throughout your Friday afternoon. But I do expect Friday afternoon to feel semi-pleasant. We'll talk about why that is coming up in just a moment, but future view feels like temperatures. Yesterday I was telling you green is good, and we saw numbers that were flirting with 60 as of this afternoon. Well, that has definitely changed. Feels like numbers in some spots are going to be just above the 50-degree mark, but all in all, that's not really warm for this time of year whatsoever. That is still definitely a chilly environment and still below average. However, it's going to be a whole lot better than the colors that you do see for tomorrow morning, where it feels like temperatures have the potential to drop down into the upper teens in central Georgia, and maybe even some areas that could see some mid-teens that creep down farther and farther down to the southeast from the metro Atlanta area. You see feels like numbers of 13 in Atlanta, 14 all the way up in Rome. I imagine the mountains are very likely going to have the potential for some single-digit feels like temperatures, but not the case here in central Georgia. It is still going to be bitterly cold, whether you're going to feel like 18 or 19 degrees or 9 degrees like up in the mountains. Those winds are definitely going to have a bite to them, so make sure that you have that layering ready to go as soon as tomorrow morning. You're probably already wearing a lot of that layering as you go throughout today with chilly rain in the forecast. But there's no relief in the afternoon tomorrow. So that has kind of been our saving grace on these crystal clear days. Typically, we are very, very cold in the morning hours, but we do warm up to at least maybe slightly below average numbers, maybe somewhere in the low 50s. That's not going to be the case tomorrow. We are actually going to struggle to get high up in the 40s for your actual temperatures. And as that breeze remains present in the afternoon, your feels like temperatures very well may not get above freezing temperature tomorrow. Now, once again, still not as bad as Atlanta, Athens, the North Georgia mountains, where you can actually still see some shades of pink up there. There feels like temperatures might not get out of the teens all day long in the mountains. But once again, our forecast is still going to be very, very cold tomorrow afternoon. It is going to be a forecast that you want to prepare yourself and probably just try to limit your time outside in general, because windy conditions, very cold temperatures, I promise you it is not going to be picnic weather whatsoever throughout your Thursday. And if you have any plans after work on Thursday, like I mentioned, it's going to be dry, it's going to be sunny, but the sunshine not correlating to a warm up whatsoever. And as you go into the evening hours, you maybe have some dinner plans with friends and family. You're still going to feel like the mid to the upper 20s by about 7 p.m. and those numbers are only going to get colder as we go into the nighttime hours, where you do see this model not necessarily picking up on what exactly I am believing. It is saying the feels like temperatures around 24 degrees. I think that the actual temperatures are going to drop down pretty close to the 20-degree mark itself as we go into Friday morning. So basically an equally chilly morning for Friday morning, as what we do have in store for your Thursday. The difference is we won't have as much of a breeze present. There will still be a light breeze, but I am anticipating colder actual temperatures on Friday morning as opposed to what we do have on Thursday morning. Now we go into Friday afternoon, where we finally see the return of green. Still not going to be a warm afternoon by any means, and we are still going to have some breezy conditions present. Not as gusty as Thursday, but Friday afternoon should be the first time that it at least feels a little bit pleasant to maybe get outside and enjoy some of those weekend plans. But we are going to get nice and cold as we go into the overnight and early morning hours, Friday night into early Saturday. But like I mentioned, we are not forecast to get below freezing temperatures. So your feels like temperatures right here, 34 and 36 degrees. With the breeze that is present overnight and early morning on Saturday, our actual temperature is very likely going to be a little bit above this. We just have the breeze that is making some of those numbers feel a little bit cooler. So over the next 3 days, not much good news whatsoever. 70% chance of seeing a shower today. Most of that chance is gone. We do have a couple more light shower chances throughout the day for the rest of your Wednesday, but we did see pretty good coverage of rain so far in the early portion of the day. But remember, I've been saying it for the past couple of days, that morning time frame is going to be your best bet and best opportunity for seeing something in the way of rain. 54 for a high temperature. I could anticipate a little bit more of a warm up, but still going to be below average. And tomorrow is definitely going to be below average. Those numbers do not do it justice. 28 degrees for a morning low and 45 for an afternoon high. Yes, that is already a chilly afternoon, but when you factor in the winds, those numbers are very likely to feel just about 10 degrees colder. We have the potential for wind chills in the teens, so around 18 or 19 degrees as you walk out the door on Thursday, and then 45 for an afternoon high temperature. It looks like our feels like numbers are going to be in the low 30s for the majority of the afternoon, and even lower as you go into the evening hours, where I was telling you about those mid 20s feels like temperatures Thursday evening. Friday actually going to be the first time that we can see maybe a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, and that light being some at least pleasant feeling weather to walk outside to, but that's going to be in the afternoon when we finally eclipse the 50-degree mark once again. So it does look like we begin a warm up as we go into the beginning of your weekend, not only after we do drop the numbers down to near 20 for a morning low on Friday morning. But let's take a look at those afternoon highs. They continue to go up into Saturday, 57 for a high temperature, but then they go straight back down as we go into Sunday. So it looks like we are eyeing yet another frontal boundary passing sometime Saturday into Sunday. That is going to usher in some cooler air into the forecast once again. And Sunday is probably going to be very similar to Thursday. Maybe not necessarily just as cold, but a very similar environment where we will have some maybe pleasantly sunny skies, but also we are going to have some breezy conditions if a frontal boundary does pass through. So your morning low temperatures, they drop down and down all the way to 20 degrees on Friday, and then we warm up because we will start to see more cloud coverage, and we are just going to see some generally warm temperatures after the bottom drops out on Friday morning. But like I mentioned, Saturday's morning's low, 36 degrees. That obviously is fairly close to that money number of 32 degrees, and it's exactly on average for this time of year, but it is just above the threshold for anything in the way of frozen precipitation on Saturday morning, so don't go buying any stock into that. However, note your morning low temperature on Sunday morning, 27 degrees, so that frontal boundary that passes through on Saturday does look to reinforce the cooler air in our forecast. And we'll go ahead and talk about how much humidity is in the forecast, because that has been a big thing and a big topic that I've been mentioning over the last couple of days. Not too much moisture in the forecast whatsoever, but let's see what the long-range models have to say about your weekend rain chances, because they did look fairly impressive for the morning hours on Saturday. The European model is the one holding the rain chances together. I'm actually more inclined to believe the European model on this one, because we did get a glimpse of Future View, and Future View had a good cluster of some widespread rain right on the doorstep of central Georgia at about 3 to 4 a.m. on Saturday. So Saturday morning, I would expect some chilly rain showers to welcome you out the door, but then after that, I think we do decently clear out for the afternoon hours. And then rain also does return as we go into Sunday morning. Remember the temperatures on Sunday. If we drop down just below freezing temperature, there could be a slim likelihood of something of the frozen nature falling. However, the GFS is the only model that is picking up on this solution as of right now. So as of the last couple of days, we've seen a bit of flip-flopping. On Monday, the European model was showing something in the way of precipitation on Sunday morning. Yesterday, neither model showed it. And now today, the GFS is more confident in it, but we also could see some overlapping areas of that blue color. We'll talk about that in a little more detail coming up here in just a second, but those fronts will pass through over the course of this weekend, and that is going to keep us chilly and dry as we go into the beginning of next week. No signs of any definitive rain chances until maybe we get into the later portion of the work week next week. So here's a look at your precipitation type. So where you see the pink colors, that's going to indicate a wintry mix, something of the sleet or the freezing rain nature, and the blue and kind of purple shades, those are going to be your direct snowfall that is correlating. So it does look like it's a fine dividing line. Unless we live in the mountains, it is not going to be anything of frozen precipitation on Saturday morning. But if we are to go about this route with the GFS on Sunday, it is hinting at a couple of hours where we could see some flurry showers, maybe even some steady snowfall. If we go according to this, I'm not too inclined to believe this because it is only what one model is showing. And then as we go into the later morning hours, our temperatures will begin their warm up, and that is going to transition more so into a wintry mix and then into a bit of a shower. Now this is at the most case scenario, I guess the most that we could expect in the way of frozen precipitation as we go throughout this weekend. The European model hinting at some steady showers as we go into Saturday, and then Sunday morning, not as definitive of a chance. So right now we're only seeing individual model runs of a couple of models in between.